Welcome to Peace Now. My name is Trudy Quaif. I'm a member of Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. We're a local organization of friends and neighbors, and we've been advocating for peace and justice for well over 15 years. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by Pippa Bartolotti. Thank you so much for being here today, Pippa.
Thanks for inviting me, Trudy. And before you even start a question, I want to say that I think Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace are the most amazing organisation. And I was out there last night with you, and the amount of support you've got on the streets locally is fantastic.
Thank you. Pippa is an activist in her own right. She's from Wales, and she's the former leader of the Green Party. And she'll tell us a little bit about that, I hope. And she'll also tell us, I think, about some of the work she's doing now, which is with the Extinction Rebellion. Well, let's start about the work that you did with the Green Party. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I suppose I even have to go back before that, really, Trudy,
Okay.
because I've always been, at heart, an environmentalist. I didn't study it, but I'm a gardener, and I like to grow stuff, and I notice the seasons, and I've noticed the change a lot. And that change is rumbling faster and faster along. So all we gardeners know there's a change. But when I took early retirement, actually, and the first thing I did, actually the first night, I drove up to Gatwick Airport and bought a ticket to Cuba. And there I started to understand what the Cubans had done in their special period, and how they had moved from the pesticides, herbicide type polluting form of agriculture to an organic form of agriculture. And if you go to Cuba, the people are beautiful, and they have this fantastic diet, and we really should be learning all the time. Their lifespan is very long as well. So if we go right back to my roots in the garden, watching my grandfather, moving up through, having my children, teaching them about saving seeds, growing seeds, the importance of being able to grow your own food. Even if you don't do it, you should be able to do it, and I think everybody should be able to do it. And so I came back from Cuba, and I was really looking at politics, and I realised the Green Party was the one which was nearest to my own philosophical basis for existence, if you like. And I read their philosophical basis, and I thought, yeah, that's a very good match. So I joined up, and within not very long, I became leader, because I was very, very motivated. And I thought, and politics is something I hadn't tried. I'd been political, but I hadn't tried it in terms of climate change and trying to effect change. And those arguments have to be put out all the time in debates, on televised debates, or debates in the street. Those arguments about how we together can stop this juggernaut called climate change, which is it is going to wreck all our lives one way or another. For example, Bangladesh is, well, 2/3 is practically below sea level. As the waters rise, and it's not just about being flooded, it's about the salination of the land and the fact that nothing will grow, nothing very much will grow in salty water. All those people are going to move. They're not going to sort of sit there and drown. And so the displacement of people in low-lying areas, in what were once fertile delta areas like the Nile Delta, all being salinated as we speak. Mm-hmm. So it's not just water lapping up against your house, it's your crops not growing anymore. Mm-hmm. It's your drinking water becoming contaminated. It's this small, as I like to call it, well, I don't like to, but it's like a death of 1,000 cuts, little by little by little, and all the people will move. We haven't seen refugees yet in the number that is going to come. Mm-hmm. Central America is predicted to become a desert. Now, are American people going to watch people through that fence die of starvation and die of thirst? Are they actually going to stand there and watch these things happening because people can't get to food and water? This is what the future is likely to lead to us. And I'm sure that every American who's listening now and who's heard me speak in the past is going to say, no, we wouldn't allow that, we couldn't. But just be mindful of European history The fascist propaganda machine is very persuasive, and you may not see film of these people dying. It may be edited completely out of your life. So I just ask people to be aware of the likely impacts of climate change on their own doorstep. It's going to be different for everyone. And we don't know, we can't absolutely predict, but we do know that the ice sheets are melting. We do know that sea level rise is rising faster and faster. We do know that the oceans, which have traditionally absorbed so much CO2, are now practically full, and the acidification of the oceans means the end of the coral reefs. We do know so much about the Mediterranean, which is a great producer of succulent tomatoes and grapes and beautiful fruit, is also likely to be desertified, which means that although it may be possible to grow these things further north or further south, it isn't necessarily going to be the answer. Right. The answer is to stop climate change. It's to stop it in its tracks. Stop burning. Stop wasting. Stop drilling. Stop fracking. That is the answer. And we can do that. It's within our power. But why don't we?
That's a good question. It's a good question. Well, here in the United States, our president tells people that there is no climate change. That's not really what's happening. And a good number of people tend to believe him. And even the opposition party, the Democrats, may admit that climate change is happening, but they don't really, in reality, they don't really do much about it. So I think we've got a lot of people in denial here in the U.S.
Well, let's put it another way. We've got a lot of people who can make a lot of money, a lot more money out of fossil fuels, and we have political parties who are funded largely by people and organisations who also make a lot of money out of fossil fuels. And nobody wants to rock that boat. They don't care. The 1% who basically run our world, if you like,
Right.
Are happy to kill us. They don't really care because they think it doesn't matter if millions die as long as they don't. And you know, if we were to tie climate change to the anti-war movement, we'd say there again, the 1% don't die in wars, it's the 99% who die. The same with climate change. Right. The same with sanctions. I mean, you know, it's the same with everything. There are people running our world, our politics, who have interests in themselves and themselves alone. And they are, you know, the fact that the planet will be largely dead doesn't mean it'll be entirely dead, but it'll be dead for billions of people. And, you know, that's mass murder. I don't mind using strong words because I know what's coming along. I read a book a couple of years ago by a man called Jorgen Randers. The book is called 2052. Now, Jorgen Randers was part of an organisation called the Club of Rome who produced a book in 1972 called Limits to Growth.
I read that book.
Yeah, you read it. Well, he was one of those guys. And he was asked to do this, and he was very reluctant to do it because it was, you know, a very gloomy thought. And there are some upsides. You know, we can turn this round. I mean, he took testimony from all sorts of organisations who said, we can turn this round. It doesn't have to be so bad. But even since he wrote the book, the feedback loops of Arctic warming, for example, where you have currently, instead of snow in the Arctic, we have rain. Now, rain is a liquid and it is dark. Snow is white. The dark will absorb the sunlight and the heat. The white reflects it back. So the feedback loop of the melting of the Arctic is causing sea level to rise much faster than was previously predicted, which on its own is also causing the extreme weather events that we're seeing around the world, but we're reluctant to join the dots of the fires in California. How many million acres were burnt in the west of Australia, America, how many acres burnt in Australia, in Korea. There are fires currently raging through cities. So we have these extreme events, these tornadoes, this flooding. Well, this is happening all around the planet. Join the dots, people. Please, everybody, just look at what's happening around you and join it all up. It's a catastrophe. And it may not be happening in your backyard today, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be happening in your backyard tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But coming back to Jorgen Randers, he said something which stayed with me, and it was so simple and so sad. He said, in his words of advice at the end of the book, don't teach your children to love wildlife and the green open spaces. Because if you don't teach your children to love these things, they will not miss them when they're gone. And that is a call to arms, really, to say the extinctions are happening now. 200 a day. 200 species a day are going extinct. This is a call. This is a huge call. Our children won't inherit the things that we inherited. Their lives are going to be harder, more extreme, hotter, wetter, more storms, more hurricanes. This is what they're going to have, and we have no right to knowingly do this.
Yes, that's true.
So, coming on to Extinction Rebellion, which is what I'm doing at the moment, is taking the argument onto the streets, because we simply cannot be in a position any longer where governments are hiding the truth from us, where they're not telling us the truth. We need to be in a position where the people are controlling the narrative and saying, these things are happening, you have to admit it, you have to tell us the truth about what's going on, and you have to do something about it, because we're willing, but we need you to help. And our governments must help. There is an international rebellion taking place from the 15th of April this year. Across the world, there'll be events in capital cities on one or all of those days. I'm going to be in New York City on the 17th of April, where we're doing an Extinction Rebellion action. But please, if you are hearing me now, look for something. I know there's events happening in Philadelphia and in Boston and across the road. Look at Extinction Rebellion websites. Find Extinction Rebellion near you on Facebook and go and join something, because we have to take the argument to the streets so that we can force our governments to take action.
Thank you. Now, a couple things I wanted to ask you about. One is, here in the U.S., I don't know what it's like in Wales, but here in the U.S., you can't really even assume that people will accept that we can do anything about climate change. There's a whole group of people on the right that say, well, yeah, maybe climate change is happening, maybe it is going to be the end of humans on the planet, but it's caused by the magnetic changes in the magnetic poles, or it's being caused by the sun, changes in the sun. And it's surprising how many people accept the fact that it's happening, but say, well, it's not caused by humans, so there's nothing we can do about it. Do you have a response to that argument?
Yes, I do. There's no such thing as a free lunch. You cannot continually burn oil, gas, whatever. You cannot continually burn these things and expect there to be no consequence. We know, and we've known, and Exxon have known since 1921, that the CO2 going in the atmosphere, and in 1921 they said it could have severe repercussions on the environment. I've seen a newspaper cutting from that time. They have known, they've always known, and they have hidden it from us. The smoking lobby did the same. The tobacco lobby said, oh, smoking's really good for your health, you know, yes, oh, thanks, you know. And it took a lot to prove that it wasn't, even though all the scientists knew. And here we're in the same situation, all the scientists know exactly what's going on. But they cannot get the governments to admit what's happening. So there is no such thing as a free lunch. The Pacific Islands are practically underwater now. They've had to move. The island of Tuvalu has been helped by New Zealand to buy land in some other islands so they can transport their culture, so they don't have to be washed away. I have seen places where the first house is down there, you can just see the roof above the sea that is lapping around it, and the second house is a little bit nearer, but the water's halfway up the walls. The third house is on the last piece of high ground left, and when that's gone, it's all gone. These are people's lives. So there is no such thing as a free lunch. You're not going to get away with it. You are not going to get away with burning continually. And we just have to leave the oil in the ground. We have to stop fracking. We have to look at the argument from the perspective of the future generations, who are going to turn around and say, you knew what you were doing and you did this to us. You left us with hurricanes and tornadoes and drought and flooding. You left this and you knew. There is no excuse. You can't get away with it. Do you know, I was driving up from DC a couple of days ago, and I saw the Amish ploughing their fields with horses. And I thought, there are people all over the world living sustainably, living as if we actually have one planet, which actually is all we have got. And I was heartened to see this happening. I know that in other countries they are still not using machinery or pesticides or herbicides. I know that in the rainforest there are tribes living totally with nature, and that's what we've got to learn to do. Not fight it, live with it. Stop the geoengineering of the clouds and all the rest of it. You don't know what you're doing, you're just experimenting. The way out is to stop burning, clean up your act, look after each other. We need a global warming of hearts. We know it's not coming from the White House right now, but it is coming from communities. And I'm heartened that we can, if we can get enough people on the streets, we can change the way government acts.
Well, talk a little bit more about this group that you're working with, Extinction Rebellion. Did that start in Europe and now it's moved to the US?
It started less than a year ago in the UK. By a couple of scientists who've always been working along this way, who see that the system is causing so much harm. And when the IPCC report came out, I think it was October or November, that's the International Panel on Climate Change, which are hundreds of scientists who put their heads together from all over the world and make a prediction about what the next thing is going to happen, and also document actually what has happened. When it came out and said, we are losing 200 species a day, everybody just stopped in their tracks. And everybody who was even vaguely interested in climate change thought, that's really bad. That's our medicines of the future. That's our biodiversity. That is the prop that holds together our entire environment. The ecology is interdependent. We need worms as much as we need tigers. When we start losing worms, we're in big trouble. And this is the kind of trouble we're in now. And a lot of people got very, very motivated. And we started to get together and plan actions. And we are, every one of us, prepared to be arrested in order to get this message across, because reasonable argument has failed. The scientists have failed. I mean, they've done their job well, but they have failed to engage government sufficiently to understand the depth of the problem. So we have started closing streets, closing down cities. We don't get into the news. We can shut 5 bridges in London, and it's really, you might get a few seconds in the news. We're not doing enough yet. 65 people were arrested on that day in London, and willing to be arrested for the sake of turning this climate change juggernaut around. And I too am willing to be arrested, because it's a tiny price to pay in order to awaken people, governments, the media. They play their part, and in not telling us the truth. So we need the truth out there, and we need action. It's a climate emergency.
So the first step is really to get the truth out there, to get people to understand the problem and how serious a problem it is. That's a big challenge right there. And then the second part of the problem is to get our politicians to act. Now, do you have specific ideas about what you would like the politicians to do?
Well, the first thing, once they have accepted the truth and the science, because everything is evidence-based, I mean, it's not as if anybody's making this up. The first thing they have to do is take steps to change the infrastructure of all fossil fuel burning systems. For example, a lot of people are depending on natural gas to cook with or to heat their homes across the world. Well, we can do interim changes there. We can pump through, for example, hydrogen to make it as an interim because it has less of a climate changing effect. The greenhouse gas is less effective in changing climate. We have to stop burning oil. We just have to stop doing it. And then and in order to do that, we need to make sure people have the right infrastructure in order to carry on their lives. So what we need is public transport systems which are really, really good. I mean, I was in DC, and you have a streetcar which is free that goes up and down. You know, there needs to be more rails and more cars.
Right.
But these are run by electricity, and electricity is clean. We need to have solar panels on every roof. It's so much cheaper than a nuclear option, and it's completely clean. We need to run our factories on solar. We need to put wind turbines up where the wind is strong and resilient. And we are watching countries across the world now, particularly in the northern hemisphere, who are now producing more than 50% of their entire energy needs from sustainable means, from renewable energy like sun and wind.
Germany, right?
Germany's good, Scotland's good, Denmark, Norway, it's all coming along brilliantly. We have deserts where we can have solar arrays, and Portugal is doing fantastic work in that area, and so is Spain. So it's happening. We've got storage. The technology in storing electricity is moving along really fast now. So if we can create the energy and we can store it, we can ditch coal, we can ditch all fossil fuels and start relying on clean energy. And we can do this within 10 years. We can do it. It's been proved that it can be done. We have the technology. It's not blue sky thinking. It's now happening. Technology is here for us to do it. Our fight is against the vested interests.
The vested interests.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we have you on our side. Now, we've got maybe 6 or 7 minutes left.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between war and climate change, for one. I don't think a lot of people realize how war really is a big part of affecting the environment and climate change. And I think people aren't aware of that. And also, can you relate that maybe to our economic system? I don't know, maybe not all at once.
Well, I'll try. Well, war is the single biggest polluter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keeping those tanks rolling is very polluting. Dropping depleted uranium bombs in places like Iraq makes the soil impossible to use, makes the land totally alien in terms of growing your food and your vegetables, and we are polluting and contaminating vast swathes of this planet through war and the effects of war. So we have to think about what war does, not just to people but to the environment. We also have to think about how sanctions on poor countries are affecting their ability to live a healthy life. And we have to think about the military-industrial complex without which countries such as America would have great difficulty moving along. But we also have to think about the cost in terms of money, the money that goes into war, I think it's something like 46% of your tax dollar here goes into war.
Yeah, just about.
Take it out of that. You don't need, choose a president, pick a war. You need to stop that thinking.
Yes.
You need to think, right, all this money can go into renewable energy, can go into the science and the technology, the research and development that's going to enrich our lives, make us healthier. The pollutants that destroy our brain cells, the pollutants that are causing asthma and autism and, actually harming our children. We can stop doing that. Take the money out of the war machine, put it into clean energy, put it into educating people to live clean lives, put it into the school system, put it into the universities and get our scientists moving up. Let's get into the age of intelligence and come out of the age of stupid, which is what we're in now. Let's use the innate human intelligence for a greater good, Because we seem to be voting through our political system time and again for the lesser evil. Well, why are you voting, people? Why are you voting for a lesser evil when you can vote for a greater good? Let's change the machinery round. Let's look after each other. Let's do this global warming of the hearts and invest all those billions of dollars into something really worthwhile and something that will make our children really proud of us instead of making them, lament that we ever existed.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, we've only got a couple minutes left. Could you just, if people listening to this interview, what would you like them to do?
I would like them to start taking their eyes away from mainstream media. I'd like them to start looking at alternative media. Get the news from other sources. Get their facts from different sources. I'd like them to look up Extinction Rebellion, which, as I said earlier, is going global, and that starts on the 15th of April this very year, which is just a few days in real terms. So I would like people to start learning, educating themselves. We have the internet. We have this fantastic tool where we can, we can increase our stock of knowledge day after day. So don't get fed stuff from Fox News and the other, what I call cheap media sources. Start looking at something more cerebral, something, invest yourself and your brain and this magical thing we have in our heads to have the knowledge to fight the extreme weathers that are coming towards us, to fight the mass extinctions. Use what you have to make the world better, but above all, remember to support each other, and that's what we do in Extinction Rebellion. It's about love and support and progress in the right direction.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. This was just wonderful. I'm so happy to have had the opportunity to talk with you about this, and I'm so glad that you're working to make this issue in the forefront for so many of us. It's the most important issue probably right now.
It is, you're right. Thank you so much, Trudy, for having me on your show, and I love community TV. It's brilliant. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us.